My name's George, and I edit the Imperfects. I grew up on Ngunnawal country, studied on Bundjalung country, and am now living and working on Wurundjeri country. On behalf of the Imperfects, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The rich storytelling history of the world's oldest living culture is what we proudly pay homage to when we share stories on the Imperfects.
Before we start this episode with Tim Spector, this is not an ad. We just wanted to have a quick chat with you before because this is a bit of a different episode. It's more usually when we talk to people, you know, we have them in the studio and we like have a conversation and we chat and we laugh and stuff. But this one is much more information heavy. But it is so helpful.
Yeah, so I first heard Dr. Tim Spector on one of the really big, I can't remember which one, it was one of the very big podcasts. And I am someone who I'm so obsessed in a healthy way with trying to just be healthier and fitter. And one of the big parts of that is what you eat. Mm. I mean, we can invent the internet and we can invent...
Well, some people can.
Yeah, I probably couldn't.
Yeah, you're right.
Someone did. Yeah.
I remember in year 12, this is 1998, a girl tried to explain to me email and we're on computers next to each other and she set up an email address and she goes, I'm emailing you now. You'll get that on your computer. I went, that's because our computers are touching. It went like in the cord.
Touching?
No, the computer's not hooked up.
Inappropriate.
Anyway, we can invent, human beings are capable of inventing the internet. Yeah. But we cannot agree on what is the best food for our bodies and for us from a health perspective. There's so much conflicting, every expert's got a contradicting take on what we should be eating. And so with that, I always listen to these experts with a level of skepticism thinking, yeah, but someone else is going to disagree and that's what they'll probably disagree on. The first time I listened to Dr. Tim Spector, I thought, yeah, that makes total sense and that's completely changed everything for me. The link to mental health is really significant and that's why we're so keen to do it on this show. But it's all aspects of your life, about living a healthier and happier life. He covers them with his approach to eating.
But Josh, you were saying that like even after listening to this, I'm listening to it, but after talking to Tim, you changed your...
Yeah. I mean, I think I sort of mentioned this on the show, but not as well as I could have. It's one of the few things that's genuinely changed my approach to eating. Because it's the first time I've ever heard someone talk about food in a healthy way, talking about how to eat healthily, that has actually made me want to eat more food as opposed to restricting life. It felt kind of life enriching the way he talks about it because food is like a very important part of my life. I love food. I love cooking. It's one of my favorite things to do. And every time I've tried to eat healthier or read about it, I'm like, well, this is going to destroy close to my favorite hobby, which is cooking. Whereas this time I felt like I can do more of it and do more interesting versions, grow my hobby and be healthier and live a longer life. I was like, it was pretty inspiring.
I think, it's definitely made me, I eat yogurt all the time now because of this episode and kimchi and, you know, all those sorts of fermented things I eat all the time now because of Tim. But yeah, like you said, Hugh, the link to mental health and just like clarity of thought and just how we feel. This is why this was so important to us to get out there and share with you guys.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a delay. You won't hear this. We've fixed up the delay for you. There was a delay, which made it quite funny when you were saying some very funny things, and he just didn't hear them in time, and we'd move on, and then it was sort of. So if you think he doesn't enjoy Ryan Shelton's sense of humour, he does. He just couldn't quite hear.
Well, we can't confirm that he does. We can never confirm that they do, but...
Well, the no laughter would suggest he doesn't, but the no laughter was because we didn't give him a chance to hear it and we panicked and just started talking again and then he was trying to get a word in.
I'm happy with that story. Thanks, Hugh. Okay. Works well. People will buy that.
So, yes, this is, I mean, just like Josh said, it was, well, like both of you said, it completely changed the way I eat food. And I actually eat, I know that food is it's a slightly contentious one to do. And I know people have very strong opinions on the second you start talking about food, it elicits pretty strong emotions with people. Josh and I know this all too well with the history of disordered eating in our family. We get that. And that's why we haven't really done an episode on food until this point. But this one we could not do. So we hope you enjoy listening to Dr. Tim Spector, and we hope also it has a positive impact on you like it has us.
We also wanted to acknowledge that food and what we eat can be a really difficult discussion, and that for some people, due to various cultural, religious, socioeconomic and health reasons, the suggestions made in this episode may not actually be recommended. So, as always, the information provided in this episode is general in nature, and we encourage you to seek appropriate medical advice as required.
Hello, Codger. You're in ruddy good luck because you've arrived in the Academy of Imperfection, where experts in their field share their wisdom on the subject of imperfection. Today, fellow Brit and one of the world's top 100 cited scientists, Professor Tim Spector, is here to educate us on the power of food.
If you gave everyone a perfect diet, you switched everyone from their current diet to a perfect diet, you could probably reduce the number of all chronic diseases by about 70 to 80%.
So join students Hugh, Ryan and Josh as they devour a healthy, well-balanced serving of Professor Tim Spector.
Well, welcome everybody. We are very excited to let you know we have an international guest for today's episode in the Academy of Imperfection.
Yeah, it's very exciting. A bit of an accent. Hope it doesn't throw everyone, but yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it.
It's a lovely accent.
Lovely accent.
We are joined by Dr. Tim Spector, who I think some people may have heard of before. This will bore you, Tim, but I'm going to read part of your bio for a second. Sorry, just for the people out there who don't know Tim's work. Tim is an award-winning scientist.
Before you get into that, I feel like people are dying to hear the accent. So, Tim, can you please reveal?
What do you want me to say?
In your natural one.
Sorry, yes, I'm a very posh English accent from London.
There it is.
Hello, everybody.
Tim is an award-winning scientist and author with over 1,000 original articles published in some of the world's top scientific journals, placing him in the top 1% most cited scientists on the planet. He is a professor in genetic epidemiology.
That's good, isn't it?
That is a very good stat.
That's great.
I feel like we need to sit in that for a second. Just simmer in that piece of the bio for a moment.
It's the good 1%.
It is, yeah. It's the good one. Yeah.
He is professor in genetic epidemiology at King's College London and the leader of the world's largest identical twin study, Twins UK, which led him to write his best-selling book, Identically Different, which looks at our genetic traits and how our environment impacts our genes. He also wrote The Diet Myth, which was the first introduction on the importance of the gut microbiomes for human health for a wide non-scientific audience. It became an international bestseller. And we are going to talk about your new book as well today, Food for Life, Tim. But I think just to introduce you, I mean, for me personally, I have been absolutely, I'm 42 years old, and I've spent the last, I guess, maybe 3 years of my life being absolutely obsessed with health and trying to be as healthy as I possibly can. And naturally in that, I probably went to exercise first, and then after exercise, fanatically for a couple of years, I then went to diet and food and what I'm actually putting into my body. And I listened to so many people, and it struck me that we can do incredible things. We can put man on the moon, yet we cannot seem to agree on what we should be eating as the best fuel for our bodies, for our mental health, for our physical well-being. And whenever I heard someone talk about it, I found myself thinking, yeah, but I know an equally credible doctor who completely disagrees and contradicts everything you've just said. And I would say, listening to your stuff for the first time in this journey of mine, I went, yes, unequivocally, this makes so much sense to me. It's changed the way I've eaten enormously. And we were so excited to get you on the podcast to share what you have learnt. Is that a good intro to why?
Well, it's what we've got. So
You never get a compliment, do you?
So what I'd like to get to by the end of this interview is what you eat every day, you personally.
yeah.
But before we do that, how did you get into, because I know this isn't how you started your journey. You didn't set out to think, right, I need to work out what is the best food for our bodies. How did you get to this point?
Well, I've been studying twins for 30 years. So I started life as a rheumatologist, which is bone and joint doctor. and was interested in epidemiology, which is a study of populations.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I was always, there was a sort of detective in me that was trying to work out why people got diseases. And I was using twins to do that, nature v nurture, that kind of thing. And that led me to study everything possible. So I did hundreds of diseases, traits, personalities, preferences, political views, sexuality, sense of humor, you name it. I'd studied it. I then got into the genetic side of it when the genetic revolution hit and we were to sequence everybody and started looking at, how genetic things were. And I was interested in obesity, trying to find obesity genes and where weight was put down. We also did a little bit on food preferences, how genetic they were, why garlic, whether you like garlic or not, is genetic or not, etc. And on that journey, I was discovering lots of interesting things, was part of a big consortia finding these genetic genes. And originally we thought there'd be one gene for each trait. And of course, it turned out that was ridiculous optimism. And there are about, thousands of genes, for example, that control something like obesity or blood pressure. And it was really only when I had my own personal experience that I really got into this in a big way, because up to that point, really, epidemiologists and doctors generally had said, well, the nutrition world, it doesn't really know what it's doing. It's very dull. The studies are tiny. There's no funding in it. And if you're an academic, you've got to follow the money. Otherwise, you can't actually do decent science.
Mm-hmm.
So no one in my sort of position was really doing that with nutrition in any big way, because it was just sort of so seen as backward and not interesting. And there was this general thing about fats and, and there's a bit of disagreement, but it didn't really rub off much on me. And I was just taught as a doctor, low-fat diet's the way to go, high starchy fruits, try and eat, a bit of fruit and vegetables, and the rest will take care of itself. And of course, that was what I was doing as an individual as well, up to the point about 12 years ago when I was skiing in the Dolomites in Italy and had what I call a micro stroke at the top of the hill, where I suddenly got double vision and my blood pressure shot up. And that was a frightening moment, because obviously, I was in the early 50s, thought I was fit and healthy. Didn't want to, suddenly get some brain tumor, stroke, whatever it was. It turned out to be a very, very minor stroke. It was enough to give me a real big scare. And that point, I decided to, find out what was best for me, and that, what am I going to do for my health? And that's when I discovered all the advice, when I went into depth on it, was rubbish, and that it was, nothing was based in science as I knew it. It was based on studies of 10 people done 30 years ago. No one had questioned, like, eat little and often, or, only eat in the, all your main meals in the morning, or these sort of things. There were tiny, ridiculous studies that weren't based on any solid evidence. And of course, the whole fat debate got blown apart, and then it sort of started about 12 years ago, and we realized that actually that data was very unreliable based on these observational studies. So it was that moment that actually coincided with me looking at twins and finding out, looking at why identical twins were different. And that was, if you've been studying twins for 30 years, you get through these phases of, twins are really cool. When you see them identical, they're so similar. Where they hold a beer exactly the same, they choose the same brands of cigarettes or whatever it is. But then you realize they do die of different diseases, they die of different times, aging isn't really similar in them. And one gets cancer, the other one doesn't, one gets depression, the other one doesn't. What explains that for people who are clones, who live most, 18 years of their life in exactly the same situation? And I'd been looking at that for years. And it was only when I looked at their gut microbes, I saw they were massively different in identical twins, or or even or similar to non-identical twins. There was no genetic component, and then we shared about a quarter of their microbes. And so for me, that was a bit of an aha moment that came just at the same time as I had my little health crisis. So suddenly I said, you know what? This is so important. This could explain everything I've been seeing up to now. And this missing part of the puzzle, the gut microbiome, could explain why everyone's got nutrition wrong up to that point. And so that really motivated me and said, right, I'm going to, dedicate the rest of my career to this area, gut microbes, nutrition, and try and, before I hang up my stethoscope, really sort something out, see if we can actually, rather than just writing more and more papers, try and do something that's really going to help people and change our whole idea about food. And I've gone on that journey as well. So really, that's the way, I've changed my diet in the same way.
Would it be, I feel like it'd be helpful, this might be a really silly question for a lot of people, but what is a what is it?
Gut microbiome.
Gut microbiome and a microbe. Would you be able to explain that quickly?
Yeah, the gut microbiome is a term we use for the community of microbes we have in our gut, maybe our lower gut, our intestine, our colon, 99% of them. And they are hundreds of trillions of them. So about the same or slightly more than we have cells in our body. So you could say we're more than half microbe.
Wow.
That is mind-blowing.
And we evolved from them, and maybe they, evolved a human shell to live in, which keeps them comfy. It's another way of looking at it.
Okay.
And so they're little microbes, microscopic organisms that you can use a microscope to see. They first saw in about the 17th century. And bacteria are the ones we mainly talk about. But that's because we know more about them. There are also other little guys there called archaea. There are also fungi, yeasts, viruses that prey off the microbes and eat them when they get overgrown. And there are also little parasites in there that we're discovering more and more about that sometimes are actually good for us. And together, this community, we're discovering what really they do. And the best way to think of it is a series of mini pharmacies. Okay, so these guys take the food you eat and convert those into other chemicals that are thousands of different chemicals that supply your immune system around your gut, where most of the immune cells are, and are really important for your immune system. Also, your nervous system and your brain, controlling your mood, your appetite, your metabolism, etc. They're key for fighting cancer, aging, breaking down chemicals as well, and they can act to interfere with every medication, including antidepressants, etc. And so, really, really important that we understand this new virtual organ in our bodies that we now understanding has a real function, rather than just being there as a byproduct of our poo. And so, that's the real difference. It's really really key that we add this to our understanding, and it really changes our whole approach to eating, nutrition, what we put in our mouths, because everything has some effect on these guys. So that's the microbiome.
It's probably a bit immature of me to giggle when you said poo. Sorry about that.
So this might be I don't know if this is an impossible question to answer or not, but when we think about food going in there and getting processed by our stomach, how much of it is being processed by our cells as opposed to this microbiome? Is it a lot more of the work being done by these other organisms, or is it more us, or is that a silly way of looking at it?
It depends what you're eating, really. So if you're eating ultra-processed, refined food, then it's mainly absorbed high up in your intestine, and your microbes don't get much of a look in.
Right.
But if you're eating real food, so the whole grains or whole plants or nuts, seeds, vegetables, anything with a structure and fiber in it, that will travel down to the lower gut where most of the microbes are, and they will be doing the vast majority of the work. So we'll evolve with microbes so that humans only have about 20 chemicals to break down food, whereas microbes have maybe tens of thousands.
Oh, wow.
So the very simple stuff, breaking down sugar or, a bit of supermarket bread or something, or tam or whatever it is going to happen right, up here, right?
I mean, ironically, you got the name wrong of the biscuit, and the word you got wrong is your name. It's a Tim Tam, not a Tam Tam, but a Tim Tim would have made more sense to you. But it is a Tim Tam.
I do, but I'm a bit rusty on my.
No,
that's okay.
Confectionery. More than okay. I mean, you're the last person who I think should know what a Tim Tam is based on your diet and what you eat.
So, Tim, I've got two questions. So the first one is obviously, from what you've just said there, the more different communities we have or the more microbiomes we have, the better. Is that right?
The more different species, yes. So generally the greater the diversity, the healthier our gut is. Mm-hmm. And that's, in a way, interesting because compared to our ancestors or hunter-gatherers, we've lost about 50% of our species, perhaps, in the last 70 years.
Wow.
And but in all the studies we do, there's a general correlation between the lack of diversity of species and poor health. And so it's a pretty good sign of your health if you get a snapshot of your gut microbes and that, there's not many of them. And I mean, the other way that we're doing with it, now that we've got this huge database with the company Zoe we're seeing that actually it's the ratio of good bugs to bad bugs. It's another sign it's perhaps a better sign. But in general, conceptually, it's easy to think of this diversity of different species. And we know the diversity of species in your gut is really important because that means you've got more chemicals you can produce. You've got, you're more flexible when faced with some threat. You've got all different kinds of immune chemicals you can produce. Your brain chemicals can change. You're much more resilient. I think that's the way to look at it. And people who are eating non-diverse diets, really poor diets, get less and less of these over time as they're basically starving their gut microbes. And this is what's happening, in the UK and Australia with ultra-processed foods as we're, killing our microbes off, essentially.
It would be, it feels like the right time to bring up something I wanted to bring up because I've just started reading the book. I'm only just sort of, 40 or 50 pages in, but and absolutely loving it. But something that grabbed me pretty early is this, because how do you know if you've got good microbiome or not in there? And you mentioned how it can be it's an expensive process to get it done in a lab and tested, but you guys have come up with a test or something that people can do quickly, and it might make Ryan giggle again. But do you want to explain what that is? Because it seemed like such a easy thing to do.
Yes, so it's called the transit time, or the blue poo test is the other, the blue poo challenge.
It's fun. So
if you go on the Zoe website, you can probably still find the instructions for the blue poo challenge. But basically, you get some bright blue food dye and you stick it in some food like a muffin, and you eat it, and essentially time when it comes out until it comes out the other end. So if it's bright blue, there's not much else that does that. Ends up in the toilet like that. And it's actually quite an effective way of giving an assessment of your gut microbiome, because the transit time, the number of days or hours it takes to get through, does tend to correlate with the diversity of your gut microbes. So I think, particularly in Anglo-Saxon countries, we've got a bit of a taboo about talking about our bowels and our bowel habits and our stools. We don't tend to show it to our doctors or our friends and family like they do in other countries. And I think it's really important we do get around this, because most people think they're healthy. They go to the toilet once every 2 or 3 days. They think that's fine. Buy laxatives, think that's normal, and it's not. We should be going once or twice a day, and the transit time should be, between about 12 and 20 hours to be in that healthy range. And the average Australian is way over that, just like the average Brit. So that's a good way to get an idea what you're doing. And it's another way to just think about, your bowel habits. Are you bloating a lot? Are you, do you get intermittent diarrhea and constipation? These are all signs your gut is unhealthy. If you can't afford a proper test. But hopefully these tests are getting cheaper. So, in 10 years, they will be pretty much routine for everybody.
Brilliant.
I think I imagine, because I know a lot of people who, food is such a comfort, and they know they don't eat well, and they probably don't need to do a microbiome test to know that what they're eating is not healthy, but they get so much enjoyment and pleasure out of the food that they eat to convince them, for them to convince themselves, or for anyone to convince them to change their diet significantly, particularly to the extent that, that you suggest in what you suggest that we eat on a daily basis, which is like whole foods and non-processed foods. It takes a pretty convincing argument for most people. And I think what a lot of people I know, what they're after is like, yeah, but what's in it for me? Like, what am I really going to get from this? Of course, they know that they'll be healthier, and they know that that's a good thing, but they might not be at an age where they think that's a problem yet. So I guess one of the things, and particularly this ties in with our podcast and what we talk about a lot, is mental health. And what I've found, even in the last couple of years, like I've changed what I eat quite significantly, and I've noticed a massive change in how I feel and just my clarity of thought, just general day-to-day feeling, as opposed to, this is completely separate from how I look or any sort of vanity things, but just how I feel. I've noticed a huge difference, and I just wondered whether you could talk a bit about the effects of changing your microbiome and concentrating on that with what you eat and how that affects how you feel.
Yeah, it's. I think you've got to have a more holistic approach. So what I'm advocating here is, one of the effects is to improve your gut microbiome. You do that by eating a greater diversity of whole, more plant foods, more whole foods. I want people to eat fermented foods as well, which are good for your gut microbes, regular fermented foods.
Can you give examples of fermented foods?
Fermented foods, so everyone knows yogurt. Then you've got a sort of super yogurt, which is kefir, which is fermented milk, and which has like 10 times the amount of microbes in it. And if you can get good quality cheeses, they have some microbes in it. It's hard to get raw milk cheese in Australia for archaic rules, but
how about a triple cream brie? Does that triple cream brie?
Yeah.
Yes.
If it's genuine and it hasn't been, and it's going to go moldy, that'll be good for you. Yeah.
Tim, that's huge news. That's great.
So cheese generally has, if you look at the epidemiology of cheese eating, people who eat cheese are healthier than people who don't eat cheese. But avoid anything that says low fat on it. That's the general rule.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Anything that says has a health claim on it and is in packaging is ultra processed crap.
Wow, that's
the
good rule.
The general scientific rule.
Okay.
The scientific rule.
And so when I talk about improving your gut health, it's all the good things to positively eat, right? And we'll try and get people to eat 30 different plants a week. Okay, that which you might find is a high bar, but that, you don't have to get there on day one, but it's an aspirational idea, and includes nuts and seeds and herbs and spices, and it's not as hard. There's lots of hacks you can do.
And coffee is included in that. Coffee would be.
I include coffee as one of my plants. Yes, because it's a fermented bean, and it's been shown that up to 5 cups a day is actually good for your heart and your health.
5, that's great.
5 cups of coffee.
I got to drink more coffee.
Yeah, I mean, some people, do get jittery with it, and there's a lot of individual variation. But all the studies now show a clear benefit of moderate coffee drinking over non-coffee drinking. It's better than tea, even better than green tea, which is obviously better than black tea.
Wow.
So this, and because it provides fiber. Actually, 3 cups of coffee is about 4 or 5 grams of fiber, which is, probably a third of the Australian intake.
Wow.
So,
That's incredible.
We haven't thought of coffee in these ways because our reductionist view is coffee, that's just caffeine. That's bad for you, right? That, it's an evil drink. We haven't actually thought of coffee as a plant, haven't thought of it being fermented, which means that it's more complex, it's got more flavor. That's why it's got all these amazing flavors. And the more complexity, just like wine, produces these defense chemicals called polyphenols that gives it its bitterness. And that, means it's good for you. And your microbes love that stuff. They feed off it. So this is why many of these foods, once you've got this different mindset about your gut microbiome, are different. And so, what was the enemy now becomes your friend. And things that were, we were told were good for us, like low-fat, ultra-processed products, are actually the enemy because they contain lots of things that attack our microbes, like artificial sweeteners, like emulsifiers, like gums, like all these artificial flavorings and colorings. They're the enemy.
Because there are such thing as good fats and bad fats, aren't there?
There are, yeah. And, extra virgin olive oil should be everyone's go-to fat of choice because it's proven without doubt to be super healthy, however much you have on it. Whether you, put it on your chips or you put it on your salad, it's still going to be good for you. And whereas low-fat spreads, some of these cheaper vegetable oils are not nearly as good, and in ways we still don't completely understand, but it's most of the manufactured fats that were really bad for us. So it's, the idea that we follow these low-fat labels is completely erroneous. We should just be looking for high-quality foods, high-quality fats. Everything should be about quality, and that's where I hate this idea of calories and fats as being bad, because they are leading us all down the wrong direction when we pick our foods. And this is really what the whole book is about trying to tell people a really different set of rules when they're going shopping or buying things that, is shocking to some people because, we've been bombarded with this message for 30 years that turns out to be completely wrong. So getting back to where we were, our gut microbes on this holistic view, I think we've got to, and the mental health aspects. What is interesting is I had no idea until I started experimenting on myself, the effects of a normal ultra-processed food diet, even if it was low, supposedly healthy, if it was low calorie, low fat. And I did some experiments with this company Zoe that I co-founded, which really is doing these tests to try and personalize nutrition for you. So it gives you it's commercially available in the US and the UK, not yet Australia, but we've now done about 70,000 people. So everyone has had an identical meal at the same time of day, and which is a muffin, and you get a glucose monitor on your arm. Have you seen these little CGM devices?
Oh, yes, yeah.
They're like bottle tops.
Circle, yeah.
Like bottle tops that just stick on your arm, and they attach by Bluetooth to your phone and get a readout in real time of your blood glucose. Okay, so incredible technology. And you show the peaks and the troughs as and that lasts for 2 weeks. So you can do all kinds of tests on that. We also test your blood fats after the muffin, 6 hours after, to see or 3 hours after or 6 hours after, what's left in there. And we measure your microbiome testing with genetic testing. And it's those three together that gives an idea of what's going on. But during this whole process, I for 24 hours, myself and 8 other people from the company Zoe were eating these muffins, and we're only eating muffins. So every 4 hours, we'd eat, I think it's 3 muffins. And it was the idea that would give us 2,000 calories in a day. We look at our responses, and I've never felt so sick in my life.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, what sort of muffins? Are they like choc chip, like vanilla?
No, they were just flour, fats, but they had high fat content, high sugar fat content. So sugary, fatty muffins. And they spiked my sugar right up into the diabetic range, and then it dropped right down again, and it spiked up again. And you said these, every 3 hours I had these massive spikes like this. And my brain, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't work. I was trying to work on a book, couldn't do anything. And I suddenly realized this connection between food and mental health and mood. And that was my first real idea. You had to stress the system because you just, life's so complicated. You can't normally focus and say, what's this food doing to me? You're distracted. But in this scenario, absolutely saw that these peaks and troughs were playing havoc with my mood and my ability to concentrate. And I think that was about 7 years ago. And it was a real wake-up call to me. And since then, people have shifted from the average Australian diet, for example, which is very similar to the average UK diet, which is majority of ultra-processed foods in the diet. And they've got rid of these sugar spikes, and they've got rid of the fat peaks, and they do the Zoe, eating the Zoe way, which is you get a square and you eat in a holistic way for your gut health to reduce your sugar spikes, reduce your fat spikes. So just after 2 months of doing that, about the majority of people are noticed improvement in their mood and their energy, about 80%. And that we were really surprised at that because we weren't expecting those to be the major, the mental effects of altering a diet to be so significant. So, as you were saying, that it coincides with your own experience, but this is now with 50,000 people's experience. So we've done it in a trial as well. So I think that we've totally underestimated the mental part of the foods we eat and the effect it has on our body. And this is one reason that people get an immediate effect when they change. If they, take the time to wean themselves off ultra-processed food and get themselves onto something that's good for their gut microbes, they get that immediate effect. But I think it's, and realize that they probably are buying themselves another 10 years of healthy life. And I think that's the other thing, that all these, these sugar spikes and this mental health, and, they're postponing all that stuff about dementia, depression, heart disease, cancer. You're just pushing it 10 years out of the distance, which unfortunately, people on the average Australian diet aren't. And I think that's the difference. So that's what we need to sell is try it. You'll notice the effects on your brain immediately, your mood, energy levels. Energy. No one had ever measured energy levels in studies before. Seems so vague and wishy-washy, but on the app we can now measure it, and it's the number one thing that improves. And customers who've done the test will write in and say, I had no idea my energy could improve so much just by reducing the stress on the body, because these peaks are basically, each time they are stressing, they're causing a little bit of inflammation. That probably causes some inflammation in the brain. You can just reduce that. It improves all the other things in life. So sleep, energy, mood, it all starts coming together. So food really is important for mental health. I think that's true. And, we could talk about the studies looking at dietary changes in depression, probiotics in depression, all of which work as well as antidepressants, or sometimes better. So I think we've underestimated the power of food as medicine, particularly in mental health.
And so there is sort of like connection between eating well and serious illness. Was that what you
such as depression,
or even cancer? And are there sort of ties to those things?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you gave everyone a perfect diet, you switched everyone from their current diet to a perfect diet, you could probably reduce the number of all the chronic diseases by about 70 to 80%.
Wow.
So
that is enormous.
It is totally preventable. Unlike genetics or it's easier to do that than to tell everyone, to be a superb athlete or, jog for 10K a day. This is something that is, in institutions, in schools, in hospitals, the government, instead of subsidizing crap food and essentially, that's cheaper and cheaper, if they wanted to make, save health budgets, etc., and do things they could, that would be the number one priority.
Just while you mention athletes, I was thinking about, I heard you talk about the impact that exercise, a lot of people will think weight loss when they're talking about food. It's the first thing they think about, or a lot of people are striving, for right or wrong, that's kind of what they're striving towards. The impact of exercise on weight loss, I've heard you speak on that before and I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, like everyone, I years ago, he used to start going to the gym when he felt a bit flabby and said, okay, I can get this off. And thought you didn't really have to worry about your diet if you were into exercise and sporty. And all the evidence now is very clear that exercise is completely useless as a way of initiating weight loss. It has really no place in it.
Wow.
And that surprised a lot of people, but
even the vibrating belts that rub around your belly.
Oh, no, of course they work.
Yeah, thank you.
They're gold standard. Yeah,
that was like $450, Tim. So. Yeah, that's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, keep the belt on. But there's no point in running. And what these trials actually show is that if you take 100 people who want to overweight and you give 50 of them are given a PT instructor and 50 are just told to read leaflets or whatever, and they're told to try and lose weight. There'll be equal numbers who gain weight on the exercise arm as lose weight. That's what it's saying. So it's never to say there's nobody who can it works for, but on average, you're just as likely to gain weight as lose weight. Okay, that's what the studies convincingly show. Now, there is some small evidence that once you've lost weight, that exercise can help you. You're not going to rebound as quickly when you regain weight. But I think we have to totally look at this whole, the fraudulent calorie weight industry is responsible for a lot of myths. That, and it goes along with this whole idea of calorie restriction being, and calorie counting being a good way of losing weight. Clearly, we're all getting much more overweight and obese than 50 years ago, and we've had the same advice, count your calories and exercise more. And it's failed miserably, and we've actually got worse. So it's understanding what your body does in response to either, when you exercise, what does your body do? It reduces the burn rate of the calories out, so your metabolism slows right down, and it triggers appetite sensors in your brain to say, eat more. That's why your mum said, go out and play to get out and get an appetite, go for a walk, get your appetite up. And it's natural. So you can't fight that nature. So the more you exercise, the more your body says, I'm not going to let you lose weight because, gosh, that'd be terrible. You might start losing muscle. I've got to conserve things. And that's from our ancestors. When we were running around, we didn't have this massive surplus of junk food. And similarly, if you reduce calories, you go to Weight Watchers and you're counting your calories, even if you can, which is bloody impossible. Most people will lose weight in the first few weeks. And then what does your brain do? It starts ratcheting up the hunger hormones, the appetite. And so every day, for every kilo you're taking off, your body is trying to make you eat another 100 calories, appetite-wise. So it's just like a thermostat that you're just turning up. And so most people get to about 6 weeks, and then they crack and they say, oh, I can't, I've got to get some carbs inside me, and then they break.
Yeah.
So that's why all the studies, 80% of people, within a few years have returned to where they started, even in the tough clinical trials where they're supervised. So most people can't do it. There are a tiny minority that seem to have that power, and maybe lower appetite signals for them, but most of us humans can't do it that way, and therefore it's the wrong approach. And that's really an important message, that just eating low-calorie junk foods is also wrong, because we now know that ultra-processed foods increase your appetite signal much more than real food. And that's part of their main danger, is they make it addictive. A bit like cigarettes, got that extra bit in, like they used to add sugars into cigarettes to make them even more tempting and addictive. That's what ultra-processed food does. On average, you would consume an extra 500 calories. That's about 20% of your intake extra, just because of the fat style of food it is, rather than the ingredients. So it's the way it's processed. It's designed to make you overeat, and that's why a lot of people quit smoking. They have these huge appetite drives, and they put on weight, and they go for ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
So the two are very similar. They're using the same techniques as the sugar and the smoking industry.
One of the things that I found really interesting in beginning the book was that I, having not had a great relationship with my weight over the years, I think I've always couched the thought process, and I've framed it in that calorie counting weight model. And then reading the book yesterday, I found myself getting really inspired by the book, because it felt like it was giving me a zest for more eating, but just more in a better way. So I found, for example, when I had to do the shopping on the way home, and I was in a greengrocer, and found myself picking a few more veggies that I wouldn't usually, just to get them into the salad, to get more different vegetables. And I just felt like inspired by the book to go out and eat more, but eat more healthy. So just if I can, I find that so much of the work in this space makes you feel guilty about your choices and the life that you're living. And it's really, as you would know better than anyone, it is really hard to choose healthy with the world in which we live. I can't think of the better word for it. But when you go to a supermarket, there's so much thrust in your face with advertising and trying to pull you away from healthy foods. But this book didn't so much make me feel guilty, but made me feel excited about the incredible world of diverse different vegetables, and trying new things and getting new seeds in there and new stuff. And it just made me feel really excited about eating. So I don't know if there's a question there, but I just wanted to congratulate you for the tone in which this book's written, in that I find it a really inspiring read, rather than something that makes me feel bad about the choices I've made in the past.
Yeah, well, that was deliberate. I mean, I got fed up reading books that, demonize certain foods and say you must never eat anything with gluten in it or lectin in it, or with this, particular chemical. And then you have to have a very reduced diet that's very narrow, and you've got to be obsessed with eating only these things. And you mustn't have nightshades because, they're poisonous, and you mustn't have this. And, the idea is we don't demonize anything, and you can still, have your donut occasionally if but you just know what it is, right? It's a treat. And if you focus on people eating more diversely, it's fun. And your taste buds start to change. You like to see that difference. Don't want everything to be beige on your plate. And this 30-a-week rule, I think, really resonates with people. And, it becomes a bit of fun, and you're trying to get out of those ruts. Always go to the supermarket, filling your trolley with the same old crap. That is, it may have been healthy originally, but it, by having exactly the same things all the time, the same salad at lunchtime or whatever it is, you're not really doing yourself justice and exploring all the fantastic food tastes. So I think it's all about exploring more foods, and I think this is why it is a positive message, and that's sort of why it's done so well. And I think the time the timing is right for people to fighting against bland, beige, ultra-processed food, for going out and trying to get all this weird stuff, trying something new every week that you've never, a rare, strange-looking veggie that you've never seen before.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that made me, because I love cooking, and so much of what I've read in the past has made, I think it felt like it was going to take away something that I really enjoy in life, which is cooking, because it felt like, I'm going to have to reduce and suddenly work with less ingredients to make it more healthy. Whereas the idea of picking something that I've never cooked with before and working out and learning how to do it felt really exciting to me, and like a great challenge and way to grow in that area as well while being healthier and good for my gut. Very inspiring.
Can I ask about your thoughts on eating meat? I know there's like sort of conflicting thoughts from different people that I've read and watched about like whether meat is good, like the sort of the plant-based versus a diet with meat in it, or like, the other end, there's the paleo sort of approach. Do you have any sort of strong thoughts? I'm sure you do.
Yeah,
on that.
The rubbish meat, the stuff in ultra-processed foods, in the frozen pizzas and lasagnas and mince and stuff like that, and sausages and burgers, has been definitely shown to be unhealthy for us. So it increases heart disease risk, cancer risk. Now, we should be cutting that out, and that's probably 3/4 of the meat that we eat. And we're much better off with plant options, or, and in the book does talk about the environmental impact of all these foods as well. So I think people have to realize now that the food choices they make are the most important things, not only for their health, but also for the planet. And, we have the power to do this with our hands. I know, there's a big debate in Australia about this, and the two sides, but whether you're into mining or cars or fuel or whatever, forget that. Actually, if we reduced our meat and dairy, and we'd have a massive impact on global warming. So cheap meats, get rid of them, is my view. Now the question is, what about high quality, organic, grass-fed beef or lamb? They're definitely bad for the planet. Okay, they're 50 times worse than eating the same amount of protein from a soybean or a pea. 50 times. That's quite a big differential. But is it bad for your health? In small amounts, my view is no. There's no evidence that eating a small amount of meat, so once or twice a week, if it's good quality, is going to be bad for you. You want to make, try and go for organic, because less likely to have antibiotics in it, less likely to have other helpful, growth hormones and other things in it, and may have some omega-3s, etc. The only problem with meat is it takes up space on the plate. And if it's, a big Aussie steak, like I used to eat, there's no room for the veggies,
Okay.
And so small portions, once or twice a week, as long as you still got your focus on your 30 plants, I think is still fine. So that's my general view. If you are having meat every day, I think there's some evidence that it isn't good for you. But how much of that is because of the lack of vegetables and how much is due to the meat itself is still unclear.
What about these products like, Beyond, and there are these, companies creating these plant-based meat substitute products? What are your thoughts on those?
Well, currently most of the ones these are the sort of V1 alternatives. They're currently ultra processed.
Okay.
So a lot of things I'm criticizing them for are the same as for these meat products. So health-wise, they're not particularly better. Although marginally better than the poor quality meats, because you don't know where they come from and what's been put into them. What the farmers have done with it, or its origin. And so it might be marginally better, but you're still worried about the ultra processing. they are 50 times better for the environment and the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to wage that up. But I'm seeing now this next generation of alternative meats, which are going to be healthier label, not ultra-processed. They're using microbial fermentation, so-called precision fermentation. And I think we have to just see this as version 1, and the future is very much version 2, and try and keep an open mind on this, because we definitely need better sources of protein. So, I say to people, swap, it's not more, it's better for the planet. It's probably of equal health value for it. Get used to it, because this is going to be the future. And as the price point shifts, and a fake burger will cost less than a real cheap meat burger, then I think everyone will be eating them.
Yep.
And hopefully the health of them will improve, because it's not great at the moment, but we've done this in less than 10 years, developed a whole new food system. So give it time.
I'm very conscious of your time. I do want to get to what you eat every single day. Just before I do that, I'm just really interested to know any foods out there or drinks that would surprise people that are maybe not as good for them as they have been told their entire lives. And any sort of things pop to mind very quickly that people are probably drinking a lot of or eating a lot of, thinking that they're doing the right thing.
Well, probably, as I was surprised, orange juice, I think, is pretty high on the list, which is basically the same as Coca-Cola for your system.
Whoa!
Except it has healthy labels all over it, and we envisage it's super healthy. But it's been kept in vats for 2 years and has taste flavor packs added to it. It really isn't what it seems, and it should come with a health warning. And these foods shouldn't be given to kids.
So you're talking about like not the freshly squeezed orange juice. You're talking about
if you squeeze it yourself.
Yep.
And you see the oranges in front of you and you squeeze it, it's probably healthy. Although, drinking more than one orange wouldn't be normal.
Yeah.
You'd be having, and you're not getting the same as an orange. So it's never going to be as healthy as an orange.
Gotcha.
So there are various grades of this, but, the Tropicana type orange juice that you get is the worst ones. And then, of course, you've got, doing it yourself, but then you are still getting all the sugar, not much of the fiber. It's not the same as eating an orange. And I think that's probably the number one misconception. I mean, a lot of our breakfast, actually, interestingly, children's yogurt is terrible, absolutely the worst thing you can give your children. The most breakfast cereals, ultra-processed, and despite all the health vitamins they add back into it, they're terrible for you. Supermarket breads, even if they're dyed brown to make them look healthy, are basically sugar bombs, and they're not healthy. So and the things like granolas and mueslis and things like that, most of them, 90% of them, are very unhealthy. So I think breakfast is a pretty good place for people to start to reshape their concept of what good food is. I've totally changed mine from muesli, orange juice. I had milk, tea with low-fat milk, and sometimes a piece of toast and marmalade, and it was terrible for me. Really bad. And so I switched to having full-fat yogurt with nuts and seeds, get about 6 or 7 in there, a few berries, often frozen, perfectly good to eat frozen berries out of season, and lots of black coffee, which I love. And
just a pint of coffee.
That would be, and an occasional, egg would be my breakfast. And I think that suits me because I've tested myself and I know I get sugar spikes, and so I'm better suited to a high-fat diet than a high-carb diet. Most people don't know that, so I'd advise them all to experiment themselves, try different breakfasts and not ultra-processed, try and get versions that are healthy, made of whole foods without additives and things, and see how they feel. See how they feel 3 hours later. Do they get those mood dips? Are you getting a sugar dip and a spike? People just need to pay more attention to their bodies and realize that the food they put in a few hours before has a real impact on what it does later. So that's changed my preferences, as well as sometimes I actually skip or delay breakfast now, because also helpful for mood is to do time restricted eating, where you're only eating in a 10-hour window.
Okay.
And you have a long fast. So that's the other thing to experiment with.
I'm about 260 days now into a 16-8 fast, and I've found it to be one of the most life-changing things from a food point of view I've ever experienced.
But not everybody does, and I know some people hate it. So it's very individual. Just like our microbes are individual to all of us, so some of these patterns are individual. So we must move away from this one-size-fits-all, move into a way that we are experimenting with our lives and our diets, working out what is best for us. And I think it's keeping an open mind. And that's really what the book is designed for, is to give people a tool book to then say, right, okay, I know about this now. I'm going to, test my own body, work out what makes me feel good. But generally, what makes you feel good, energy-wise, mood-wise, is also good for your health, good for your gut microbes. So I think
lunch and dinner before we let you go. What do you have for lunch and dinner?
Sort of fingers crossed here for a wheel of brie for lunch, but
and then we eat pies for lunch. But it varies. I used to have a sandwich at lunch at the hospital, and it was brown bread, tuna, sweet corn. Terrible for me. Probably contribute to me gaining a kilo every year. And so it's, if I'm busy, it'll be some fruit, a handful of nuts would be, or a salad. But I either sort of just have a snack, or I sit down properly and have a salad or a soup. And my evening meal is mainly veggie. I do have meat once or twice a month, and if I'm eating out at a restaurant, I'll have fish, but I won't cook fish at home anymore. So it's trying to get my diversity of plants in there, but I try to vary it. So if you had exactly the same lunch and things, it would be a bit boring. So it's seasonal. It depends where I am, whatever. But I'm always looking for something new, and I try to build in fermented foods into my life. So I'll add in kimchi, which is a Korean sauerkraut, into lots of things. Have always have it with cheese. Sauerkraut's great as well, and I often pour kefir as like a salad dressing, or onto the end of curries and things like that. So I'm always got lots of fermented foods in my diet as well. And but it's changing all the time. So and I'm fermenting lots of foods at the moment. So I'm doing lots of experimental stuff. And when I'm going, I just always try and pick something different on the menu, something I've never had before, which is the opposite of what we always used to go for our favourites, but go for something you've never heard of.
Are you drinking water all day? Is that your choice of fluid, or?
No, I drink
coffee.
Lots of black coffee.
He's going to get through 5 cups a day.
I've got to get to 5 cups of coffee. I drink kombucha, which is fermented tea. I like the odd beer. You'll be pleased to know.
Fermented?
Which
Also fermented?
I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to get my act together to do a study to show it's healthy. Belgians claim it is good. Belgian beer is good for your gut microbiome. We know artisan cider probably is good for it. And we did a study about red wine as well. So 1 glass of red wine a day is good for your gut microbes. So I'm a big advocate of that.
Okay,
that's great.
Although my glass is slightly bigger than the official one.
Wow. Oh, Tim, it's. I feel like I've just learned a lot of stuff about food, and very, very exciting. Like I have, as someone who has felt the effect of like eating well, especially on my mood more than anything else. A lot of that was very affirming. So Thank you so much for your time, Tim.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read the book.
The book is food for life. It has been such a privilege to chat to you. Congratulations on all that you've done, and you're putting so much great stuff out into the world.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
And we thank you so much for your time today.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
nice
Tim.
to chat.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Tim.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Bye.
Thanks.
The Imperfects is hosted and produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Ryan Shelton and Josh Van Cuylenberg. Our executive producer is Bridget Northeast. This episode is filmed by Andy Poole and edited by George Martin. The Imperfects is not a licensed mental health service and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, treatment or assessment. The advice given in this episode is general in nature, but if you're struggling, please see a healthcare professional or call Lifeline on 131114.